My first week as a mortuary attendant had been uneventful, almost serene. The senior technician, a grizzled man with a soft voice and years of experience, showed me the ropes. He moved with a practiced grace, making the work seem almost meditative. There was a rhythm to his work, a kind of solemn respect that I quickly adopted. By the end of the week, I felt confident, almost at peace with my new responsibilities. But then came the second week. I was alone. The hospital was quiet at night, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound as I made my way to the mortuary. The morgue's cold air bit at my skin, but I had grown accustomed to it, or so I thought. That night, they brought in the body of a young woman. She had drowned, they said. Even in death, she was breathtakingly beautiful, her pale skin smooth and unmarred, her hair dark and flowing, like something out of a tragic fairy tale. As I prepped her body, I couldn't help but think, how could God take someone so beautiful so early? It was a thought whispered in the silence, meant for no one but me. Yet, as soon as it crossed my mind, I heard a soft, almost joyful laugh. Startled, I looked around, but the room was empty. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I turned back to the woman's body, and for a brief moment, I saw it, her lips curled into a faint smile. I blinked, and it was gone. My breath caught in my throat. Just my imagination, I told myself, though my heart pounded in my chest. I reached for my tools, trying to steady my shaking hands. But as I turned back to the body, I froze. Her hand, which had been resting peacefully at her side, was now gripping my arm, cold and unyielding. Her eyes, which should have been closed, were wide open, staring directly into mine. Panic surged through me, my body refusing to move. I forced myself to close her eyes, pressing my hand against them, as if that simple act could undo what I had seen. But as soon as I stepped back, she sat up. Her once serene expression twisted into something terrifying. Her eyes were locked on mine, her smile growing wider, more menacing. I stumbled back, my mind screaming at me to run, to get out of that room, but my legs wouldn't obey. I watched in horror as she slowly turned her head towards me, her gaze never wavering. And then she spoke, her voice a chilling whisper that echoed in the stillness of the morgue. You shouldn't have asked, you shouldn't have wondered why. I don't remember much after that. Somehow, I found myself outside the morgue, my breath ragged, my heart threatening to burst out of my chest. I couldn't bring myself to go back in, not that night, not ever again. The hospital found another mortuary attendant soon after. I never told them what happened, never spoke of the young woman who died too soon. But even now, I can still hear her voice, that haunting whisper, echoing in the darkest corners of my mind. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak, every shadow, sent shivers down my spine. I could still feel her cold grip on my arm, still see those lifeless eyes staring into mine. I tried to convince myself that it was just a hallucination, the product of exhaustion and stress. But deep down, I knew the truth. By dawn, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going back to the hospital. I'd quit, find another job, something, anything, that didn't involve cold rooms and silent bodies. But as I left my apartment, I felt a presence, a heavy, oppressive weight that followed me everywhere I went. I was haunted. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I heard it again, her voice. This time, it wasn't a whisper but a soft, melodic hum, like a lullaby. My heart raced, and I bolted upright, my eyes scanning the room. I was alone, yet the sound grew louder, filling my small apartment with its eerie melody. I clutched the sheets, trying to drown out the sound, but it was useless. The hum became words, words that chilled me to the bone. You didn't finish. You didn't make me beautiful. I squeezed my eyes shut, my mind racing. I could see her in my mind's eye, sitting on that cold steel table, her eyes filled with something between longing and anger. The next night, I heard footsteps in my hallway. Slow, deliberate, they echoed through the silence, stopping just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, hoping, praying, that it was my imagination. But then the door creaked open, and I felt a cold draft sweep through the room. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The weight of her presence was suffocating. And then, I saw her. She stood at the foot of my bed, her dress still wet, clinging to her pale form. Her hair hung in dark, sodden strands around her face, but it was her eyes, those cold, dead eyes, that held me in place. "Make me beautiful," she said, her voice like nails scraping against glass. "You promised." I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't go on like this. My life had become a waking nightmare, every corner filled with her presence, every shadow whispering her name. I had to finish what I started. The next day, I forced myself back to the hospital. The morgue was quiet, almost peaceful in the daylight, but it didn't comfort me. I made my way to her, my hands trembling as I unlocked the drawer where her body was kept. There she was, just as I left her. Her eyes were closed now, but her face still bore that unsettling smile. I swallowed hard, gathering the supplies I needed, makeup, a brush, a dress that I had picked out from a store on my way over. It was beautiful, something that might have been worn by someone alive, someone who had a future. As I applied the makeup, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me, judging my every move. Her face softened as I worked, the smile fading into something more peaceful, almost grateful. I dressed her carefully, my hands steadying as I completed the task. When I was done, I stepped back, taking in the sight. She looked almost alive, her beauty restored, her face serene. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then, as I turned to leave, I heard her voice again, soft and satisfied. "Thank you." I didn't look back as I left the morgue, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight that had been pressing on me for days seemed to lift, and for the first time since that night, I felt like I could breathe again. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that she's still with me, watching, waiting. I've left the hospital, moved to a new town, but at night, in the silence, I sometimes hear a soft, melodic hum, and I know, she'll never truly leave me. I made her beautiful, but in doing so, I bound myself to her forever.